This is the Wealthy Retailer Podcast with your host, Dan Holman. Every episode, Dan talks with a variety of retail experts, owners, managers, and so much more, sharing their expertise, their experiences, and the retail topics that matter to you, the independent retailer. The Wealthy Retailer Podcast is brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. Learn more at retailbycrs.com.
Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Wealthy Retailer Podcast. I am your host, Dan Holman. Today, I'm fortunate to have a guest that really runs the gamut for me. This is someone who very quickly became a mentor to me, 7 or 8 years ago, someone who I rely on as a peer, someone who I believe is probably one of the most intelligent retail minds on the planet, and someone that I get to call a friend. Marc Weiss, the CEO of Management One, is here today. Marc, thank you so much for joining us again. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Dan, and you're overly kind in your description.
I'm not sure about that, but I'll accept the humility. Thank you from you. So, listeners, today our focus really is going to be to let Marc share with us sort of the winners and losers of 21. This is going to be a bit of a recap for 21 and a look forward. And we want to hear from Marc what he sees are the winners and losers in 21, what those retailers did to really move the needle for themselves. And then, what does 22 look like in retail? There are so many opinions about what retail is going to look like next year. And Marc and I are of the same mind. I don't think there's been a better time to be an independent retailer. I think that the world is our oyster right now. So Marc, take it away. Let's talk about what the winners and losers were for this year, for 21.
Yeah, so, I think the pendulum really swung from, what happened when the shutdown happened in April of 2020, March and April of 2020, when there was tremendous fear and uncertainty and nobody, we were washing our groceries, for crying out loud. And where we are today, where, there's been this resurgence in business that we expected, but it's been tremendous. We just didn't recognize there was going to be supply chain disruptions, which I think worked out to everybody's benefit. And I think that, I think the pendulum has just swung and everybody's had an opportunity to reap the benefits of it. And I think the really message going forward is, you created wealth and cash in your businesses, how you continue to invest that. At least in the States, you were gifted by the government with plenty of money. And that allowed a lot of retailers to, pay their payroll and use that their funds that they would have used for payroll to do other things, which we encourage them to do. I think the same thing is true for 2022. What are you going to do? What's going to bring you the greatest value in 2022, and how are you going to invest it? And that's where those would be the questions that I would be asking now.
Mm-hmm. And so let's just look back at those retailers that saw that influx of cash into their business, a little bit of help. Where did they start to apply dollars that made the biggest change?
Well, I think a lot of them have been applying dollars just in chasing goods and trying to get deliveries. And there's been this incredible relationship between, purchases and sales. So if I landed 10,000, I sold 10,000. If I landed 100,000, I sold 100,000. So I think this what they've learned is everything we've been saying for years and years. Don't over assort. You don't need as much inventory as you think you need. Go narrow and deep. And I think the people who were able to do that successfully were the winners. People who weren't able to do that obviously didn't get to reap the benefits of what's going on. I think a lot of people, psychologically, I think it's very understandable. It's very fresh in everybody's memory of the inventory they owned at the beginning of the pandemic. There's a certain fear still and uncertainty that I don't want to be sitting with all that inventory again, and I don't want to be caught that way. So I think there's been some hesitation, but I think the people who have really seen this surge in business and been able to able to really go out there and be aggressive about it, they've been the big winners. The people who haven't, they're sitting on the sidelines and will miss an opportunity of a lifetime. This has happened once in my life, and I think the only time I ever saw this kind of surge in business was after 9/11. At the end of September, home watching their TVs. And then at the end of September, early October, people just went back to the stores and to hang out and be with people, be part of a community, and Christmas-like numbers then. But this surge is much longer. There's, so much pent-up desire to do things and buy things and enjoy life again. It's, some people equate it to the Roaring 20s. So
Right.
I'm not that old, but so I think the losers are the people just who haven't done that. And I think the losers will be, I think the people who don't figure out, and I said this before, and I'm going to repeat it, where am I going to get the most value in 2022 and be willing to invest there? And I think that's going to be, for some people, the most challenging part of it, because there will be some return to normalcy. Things will, won't continue. The supply chains will ease up. Those kinds of things will happen. But I do think I think now is the time to really be thinking about what's my business going to look like next year and what am I going to do about it? Where am I going to, because you're faced with a whole new set of challenges you weren't faced with. And everybody always complained that they couldn't find the right people, but now that's a real issue.
Right.
So compensation has to change. There's so much change that retailers are not only expected to do, but have to do to survive and thrive and sustain their business, that they have to adapt in a way that they didn't have to for many, many years. That's going to be I think that's going to be the challenge of the next couple of years.
And do you think that there is more emphasis today on, driving the business in more areas than there have been in the past? It used to be, we drove inventory into stores and fresh goods into stores, and as the door swung open, we felt success. But today, we have to apply risk in every different area of the business. We have to apply marketing risk that we never had to before. We have to become, and I feel like the people that didn't have great success, those that are saying, I haven't had my best 6 months in, the last 6 years, or I haven't broken a new record, it's because they haven't taken any risk. They're still resting back on, their legacy knowledge that is perhaps a bit of a risk for them in 22.
Right. So I think that's a really good point. And I think you're in the business, listen, if you're going to go into the retail business, you're going into the business to take risks. Obviously you want to mitigate risks using data and information, but you got to be willing to roll the dice. And now's the time to do it because there's high demand. There's tremendous appetite for goods. People want to be responsive. So I think, the mitigation is already there. You just have to be willing to take it.
Right.
And so to your point, Dan, I do absolutely. And the unwillingness to change and adapt can be your downfall now, because you've got to. Used to be you could be the second adapter. You almost have to be the first adapter today. You have to be first in, and you have to be willing to try things. And that's why I've always promoted the idea of fail fast.
Right.
It helps mitigate risk. If you use data and it's not working, then stop.
Then stop.
But it's something, and then move on to the next thing, because you'll find something that works. And I think you can't take old thinking and apply it to new thinking. And I think we see. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to stop your thought there.
Well, I think one way to examine that is, I think that if you take a look at, you talked about marketing, and I've always, for my whole life, I've said, if you have good people and good product, there's a good chance you'll do business. And I've changed that. You have to have good people, you have to have good product, but you have to have great marketing. And, the content and the messaging and all that, your digital footprint is got to be part of the mix. And you've got to be open to that. And you have to be willing to implement that, and that's going to cost money. So you've got to be willing to bring an investment in that and recognize that you have to embrace that as part of your culture and your future, and not treat it as an add-on or an afterthought. So, and there's lots of technology out there to help you today that didn't exist before, and there's ways of measuring it. Goodness, when I grew up in the business, did you run radio? Did you run TV ads? Did you do, mailers or email, or even
Right.
email is not new anymore. But now there's all these other things that you have to pay attention to. And so to the extent that you're willing to embrace that, and not as an afterthought, but as, part of your existence as a business, is that's where the change is.
Right. And do you believe that the consumer appetite today for new really does make them an early adopter or a first adopter.
Yeah.
You see, it's not about having this great glut in inventory that you have some supply for the demand. I feel like you've got to have newness in your store because she's out there looking for something that's new. She's rewarding herself with new, not old and discounted, old and tired dog inventory. She wants fresh goods.
Yeah, it's all about fresh. I mean, more. It's always been about fresh, but it's like uber fresh now because people really want, what's new, and they want instant gratification, instant, satisfaction. A lot of that is just the technology that exists today. I mean, phones, sit on an airplane and, people are, while they're on the tarmac, they're looking at their phone shopping. I mean, it never goes away. So if you're not in that world, you're missing that world, and that's where the world is moving. So, and how you connect to the customer and create that excitement and that energy, and I think, other people have talked about it. This isn't my idea, but, thinking about your business as a brand and not a store is a whole different way of thinking about your business because you make decisions differently. It's not just about your storefront, your windows looking nice and fresh and not having stuff that's 2 weeks old, but what's on people see, digitally, that has to be fresh and new and consistent with you have to be consistent in your presentation and your audience and how you broadcast yourself, both in a brick and mortar as well as digitally. So,
and are you of the same belief that I am, that we've become more influencers than marketers in a lot of cases? Some of the success that we see at retail is because that leader or someone that is the face of the organization is out there influencing buying decision today.
Well, sure. I mean, I think that there's three camps. I think there's the legacy retailers who just want to continue to do business as they've always done it and really aren't interested in, what we're talking about now. Then there's the legacy retailers who have adopted but are struggling. They don't know how to do it, how to implement it, where to spend money, what to do. I mean, they're just kind of trying to figure it out and a little lost. And then I think there's the new breed of retailer that comes into retail from the digital side, and they're learning retail faster than the legacy retailers are learning the digital side.
Right.
And we're seeing explosive growth. I mean, they're doing insane amounts of business. But they understand concepts that some of our legacy retailers don't understand earlier on. I mean, they understand narrow and deep, and they understand how to use the media as a message. And it's exactly what you talked about, Dan. They know how to present themselves. They know how to influence. They know how to create an audience. They know how to keep people interested and cultivated. They're entertainers, and they do it really, really well. Right. And I think for a lot of legacy retailers, they don't see themselves that way. But that doesn't mean you have to be that way. You just have to find people who are that way.
Right.
So, I mean, I think a lot of times we take so much ownership of everything we do, you don't really have to do it all. You just have to find the assets to do it and let go.
Right. And let go, man, oh man, isn't that worth saying again? And you've got to let go. And I think, before we clicked the record button on the podcast, we talked about, how you've always surrounded yourself with people that were smarter than you, that knew things that you didn't. And so let's apply that logic to a 30-plus-year-old data company, somebody that 2 years ago could have probably told the future pretty easily. And you've amassed this more than 3 decades worth of information. What I would maybe even sometimes say that you have been a bit of a legacy retail provider. How do you adapt your company to fit this new retail landscape that's there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's our biggest challenge. One way we did is we reinvested in our technology. So, another way is, we go out in the field and learn. The other thing is we've got so many clients that we get to learn from them. So I think it's keeping your ear close and listening and better understanding and how we're going to use technology in the future to deliver information. But yeah, we've had to adapt. First, we had to adapt during COVID to become more of an educational and a thought leader in our community, which has really driven a lot of our growth. Mm-hmm. But so our core focus isn't just merchandise intelligence, it's education as well. But by being involved in education, that means you're also involved in learning. So then we've got to figure out, as we're learning, how we adapt that to technology and then use that information to benefit. So for us, change is real. It's painful. It's expensive, and it's challenging. And then getting people to change along with us is also painful, difficult, and challenging. So I think there's a benefit at the end of the road for that. But yeah, I would say it's our biggest challenge is, listen, we want to be sustainable and we want to contribute to our community, not in the short run, but in the long run. So yeah, I mean, it's a good question, because every business, whether it's mine or yours or a retailer's business, we all have to go through what the challenges of, and really talk about challenge. I mean, I like to read inspirational stuff because it helps keep me motivated that, people have gone through a lot darker, harder times than I'm going through, and they get there. So I think, a lot of it's like anything else, Dan, so much of what we do is mental, and how we approach it, mentally, and how we lead and how we, organize it. But you also have to one of the things that, I learned is you have to know where you are today and also be thinking about where you're going to be 3 years from now. So juggling that and not over responding and not under responding is a balancing act. That's why I say, and this will be the third time I said it, but think about what brings you value in 2022. And that's what I've been doing for the last couple of months with my team is, where are we going to get, where are we going to get where can we invest our money where we'll get the biggest value for our community? And we always put our customers first. Where do they, even if they don't know where they need to be, we're thinking about where they need to be, and we're trying to adapt to it. And I think for a retailer, you've got to think about where your customers are going and adapt to that. And that means also listening to them and being with them and understanding them and thinking about what's next for them. And that's part of your challenge.
Right. And so, Marc, share with the audience what tools, you and Management One rely on to keep focused. I mean, you said a key word for me that was that 3 years. What tools are you employing today that retailers need to be employing at some level, not maybe to the same degree that you are, but what tools should they be using?
Well, you should be looking at your data every day. I mean, listen, I did a webinar yesterday, and I reintroduced the importance of having a 12-week cash flow. I mean, we created that tool during COVID. You should look at your business annually and have an annual budget, but you got to look at it in 12-week cycles, because things change and adapt. And that goes back to fail fast. So I think, vendor performance reports are critical. And I think that looking at, what's working, every decision you make should be able to be measured. So you've got to have data points for it and create scorecards and measure them, and then problem solve what's working, what's not working, and be really attentive to it and keep learning. I mean, I wake up every morning, I read the Wall Street Journal, I read read the Wall Street Journal, I read Bloomberg, I read Retail Dive or other magazines, Business of Fashion. I constantly try to glean the articles. I mean, they're not all right. I mean, some of them are just editorial spins, but people are doing interesting things. I follow leading companies. I follow Farfetch, for example. I mean, they're a leader, not just digitally, but they're also a brand. They're also a retailer. So they're a first adopter in many things. So look, I'm talking to the indie community, but you can look at what some of the bigger players are doing. You can't duplicate what they can do, but you can learn from what they do and then figure out how you can adapt it. So I think part of it is just being present in the marketplace and embracing it and not getting frustrated by it, but just thinking about it. So, and that stimulates thinking, and that's what it's all about. I mean, we're in the time of creativity. I mean, somebody a lot wiser and smarter retailer said to me, we're in the time of the novelist and the artist. And if you don't have that creative in your business, then outsource them or hire them. We did. I mean, when we just created the M1 process to better train our retail experts so that we're more consistent in our delivery for our new people. And we hired an author, a person that, is a big time author, and he knows how to write, he knows how to communicate. So I think that, go outside your comfort zone. And, you were talking about risk. Well, part of the risk is go outside your comfort zone, right, and do something, and don't be afraid to do it. There's lots of creative people out there. I was watching Shark Tank a couple of weeks ago, and Mr. Wonderful was saying, if you ask me what to go into college, I'd say be an engineer, be an engineer, be an engineer. Those are the three best jobs to get paid out of college. Now I say go to liberal arts, because the people who can write and communicate are getting, big paychecks when they graduate graduate college, because companies need people who can create content. And so if you're not a person that creates content well, then find people who are, be willing to hire them and outsource them. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was at a wedding this summer. It was a COVID postponed wedding, and the person that officiated just did a marvelous job. So I went to him afterwards and I said, yeah, that was great. But, it was 45 minutes. I couldn't believe how long you kept us engaged. He said, oh, well, the bride she wanted a 45-minute ceremony. So I said, well, you were amazing because you kept us engaged and you were funny and it was just well done. And then he showed me his notes. I mean, he spent hours putting this together. So I said, would you like to write for us? So, you just work, when you talk to people, if you find somebody who's got a talent. So, yeah, he's just submitted 2 articles and we're going to pay him per word. And because we need content the same as you do. Right. So don't be afraid to go out there and just look for people. When you find somebody who's creative and bright, just talk to them. I mean, you never know where you're going to find people.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well said. You never know where you're going to find them. It will surprise you. So let's go back and talk a little bit about supply chain. Yes, there's a bit of a disruption out there, but do you still believe that there's lots of inventory to access? I mean, Mark, if we look for negative, we're going to find it everywhere. If we want misery, it's out there.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be willing to chase goods. Right. There's aggregated marketplaces like Fair to Find Goods. There's Swap Retail. There's Fitted for footwear. I mean, there's goods out there. You just have to find them. You have to be willing to try some B vendors. I know clients that worked out relationships with B vendors where they got goods on consignment or returnability. Some of those B vendors will become their A vendors until they can get their A vendors. So, I mean, you have to be willing to go out there and just, not say, well, if I can't get it, I'm not going to have it. You got to get it. Right. So get it and you'll learn something. And you got to hustle. I mean, you just can't say there's a supply chain and nothing's available. You got to go out there and find it. Other people are.
Right.
And by the way, you can do less with more, or think about some different types of merchandising strategies. So,
right. How do you decipher between an A vendor and a B vendor? How do I know which one of my vendors is A versus B?
That's a great question. Of course, it's data. What's my best sell-through margin in the shortest period of time?
Right.
If you get a quick sell-through in less than a month at full margin, that's an A vendor. If it takes longer, the longer it takes to sell, the lower the range. Because an A vendor, when it hits the store, there's demand for it, especially now. It sells quick, it sells fast. I mean, think about some of the vendors that, I was talking to one client yesterday. They have a $70,000 order that's completely pre-sold.
Right.
So they're just waiting for it to come in. So
I think I maybe share this. You and I might have talked about this before, but I truly believe that an A vendor is a disruptor in your store. I think that disruption comes from those A vendors. The B vendors are the ones that perhaps have defined who you are, which isn't maybe who you want to be tomorrow. I think the disruption comes from those A vendors that create excitement and high turn at full price, that they gather an audience that really wants to follow you. And I think our business today, to the degree that we can disrupt our assortment, we'll find some success.
Well, if you're a good merchant, you could have your own private label and you could be that disruptor too. It doesn't have to come just from the outside. And the way that private labels working today, the minimums are much lower. You can collaborate. I mean, there's things that you can collaborate on within your own community. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's lots of ways that you can be a disruptor, like you say, and be an A vendor and create it on your own if you can't find it. You just have to go out there and seek it.
And seek it. Yeah.
And seek it and, find people who will do it. And I mean, we have vendors that are delivering, they have 11 deliveries a year. I mean, why can they do it? So, I mean, if you always do what you've always, so there's that old saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. Well, one of the co-founders of Management One, Evan, used to say, if you always do what you've always done, you'll get less. I think that that's more true today than it's ever been true. You gotta go out there and seek it, look for it, and hustle's part of it. So I know it's easy. People say, well, you're sitting on the sidelines, and you're not the one that has to be in the store and open the doors and hire the people and buy the goods and market it. Yeah, we get that you have to wear a lot of hats, but in our business, we have to wear a lot of hats too. Right. So, I mean, that's why you have to put what's going to create the most value for you. That's like the fourth time I'm saying it, and prioritize it and do it. You don't have to do everything, but if you do a few things really well, and then you hire out for some of the others, you'll be just fine. And don't worry about what you have to spend, because if they're the right person doing the right thing, they'll be productive and you'll get your investment back. The worst thing you can do is not do anything.
Right.
The Wealthy Retailer podcast is brought to you by Canadian Retail Solutions. Learn more at retailbycrs.com.
Okay, I want to jump back now to, you talked about scorecard and dashboard. Give me, 3 metrics that you believe have to be on every retailer's dashboard, and do me a favor and make one of them not inventory.
Well, cost of purchases. I mean, I think cost of purchases has to be part of it, because you got to look at, you have to know what it costs you to run your business, and you have to know what cash margins you're going to create, and then how much you can invest in risk. So I think cost of purchases is critical.
And do you think that Mark is one of the greatest hurdles to cross, to get over with a retailer, to focus heavily on cost of purchase instead of gross margin?
Yeah, I think gross margin is, unfortunately with gross margin, you're recognizing profit on unsold merchandise, but really it's a paper profit, doesn't mean anything.
Right.
So yeah, I think transitioning to cost of purchases is critical. There's lots of important metrics. If I go on the non-inventory side, I would be looking at compensation now. I think that's a key metric. It's always been about, at the end of the day, it's selling costs.
Right.
And you should know what your selling cost is, which is, what is the percentage of your payroll to what people sell. So, I think selling cost is important, but I think you can be creative in compensation plans. And that all goes back to efficiency,
right.
How well you're efficient with your inventory. I've come up with a couple of new compensation plans for our clients, for both their salespeople and their buyers. And I think it's important. I think people need to be rewarded. And I think that now is a good time to do it. I think you've got to think about compensation in a completely different way, and get over some narrow thinking about what comes first. You're going to have to take the risk that you're going to hire the right people and they're going to do a good job for you. If they don't, then it's your fault for not making that change. So I think you can't be too cautious about waiting to hire people. Right. Remember, teaching people to sell and communicating with customers is a trade. It's a skill, right? So you can train for skill. You can't train for value, and you can't train for how people want to be with the people want to be and relate to other people. So look for the right kind of people that you can compensate and grow. So I would say that would be, how you measure your payroll, I think, is really critical. And go ahead.
Do you think that percentage of revenue has changed?
Yeah, I think it's probably going up.
Right.
So, I think but initial markups are going up too. So I think you kind of have to map that out and see what your tolerance level is. You either have to get a quicker turn on lower margins, or just get higher margins. So there's a certain amount of, maybe you got to be willing to do a little math, because actually math is very freeing in terms of allowing you to make decisions. So that way you're just not making arbitrary decisions. A lot of people make decisions based on experience and myth. Well, it's proven that, rules of thumb, are right about 47% of the time. So you're wrong about 53%. And they've actually proven that psychologically in decision theory. So I would say that be careful of your rules of thumb. They help you make decisions, but sometimes those decisions, if they're not data oriented, can be can be difficult. The other metric is that obviously you spend more money on inventory than anything else. So I kind of always go back to that. But people are important. And then on the marketing side, you're going to have to look at what your return on ad spend is and what that looks like, because you're going to have to keep feeding the marketing engine. So I think coming up with a metric that you're comfortable with, that you can keep investing and seeing growth there, is important. And then I would probably add, get yourself a good CRM and learn how to use it.
Right.
I think that your relationship with your client base is critical, and how you reach out to them and text them and message them and keep track of them. I think it's always been important, but you can't do it on a spreadsheet anymore. You really need to know and understand that there is a science to marketing that is true today. And for a long time, you could argue that it's hard to measure marketing, but that's not true anymore. I mean, in our own business, we have marketing qualified leads. We have sales qualified leads, sales qualified leads. So, we know how much we have to spend to generate those kinds of numbers. And the same thing could go in a retail business. You know who your customers are. So I would be paying a lot of attention to the CRM and the statistics within my customer base, and looking at how you can focus on that. And there's a lot of science behind that. And there's some pretty good apps out there like One Shop and people like that. You should really investigate it. Mm-hmm. And that's the other thing too. I think a lot of retailers have got to be open to looking at third-party apps. I mean, you don't have to reinvent the world. There's some really good apps out there that aren't expensive, and you'll get a big return on your investment for them. But if you use them, it's like anything else. Don't spend money on something you're not going to use, but if you're going to invest in something, use it, because you'll profit from it. You can learn a lot by looking at by having the information and the data. And so I would encourage your audience to not only go to market to shop for goods and product they're going to sell, but also be mindful of other technologies that might benefit you. And it doesn't mean you have to go out and spend thousands of dollars tomorrow on the next gadget, but be thoughtful. Use resources like Dan, for example, to vet those resources. So there's lots out there that you can do to grow your business.
Okay, so Marc, in the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen financial metrics change, obviously, and we talked about perhaps compensation being a greater percentage of revenue, or that number has gone up. Maybe the percentage isn't so much on the increase, but marketing definitely has. We used to live in our legacy world that if you're 1% to 3% in marketing, you're probably doing a pretty good job. But that number is vastly different today.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot higher. It's a variable number, so your variable expenses are going to go up. But don't forget, if your volume's going up, your fixed expenses as a percent go down. That's why you should pay attention to probably a good time to take a look at your contribution margin,
right?
Because that's your cost of purchases plus your variable expenses. So I would definitely, the quicker you can cover your fixed expenses, the more money you have available to spend on marketing. But you really have to look at capturing market share, because the big threat to retailers in the future is you don't know where your competition's coming from. It's not the department store in the mall, and it's not the guy down the street anymore. Right. It could be somebody in Edmonton or somebody in Newark.
Right.
So who's reaching out to your customers? I mean, we've got a big jewelry client, and they've got billboards in Los Angeles and Chicago and Dallas. And they have one location, but they're investing in billboards on other parts of the country, and they're doing business. So they figured it out. So I think you don't know where your competition's coming from anymore. So another reason why you've got to be involved in branding and being digital and messaging and not being afraid of reaching out. I mean, this is a time of courage. Mm-hmm. This is not a time of shrinking and being a shrinking violet. I mean, it's a time that requires courage. And if you don't have it, get it. I mean, read, go to webinars, find a coach. You went into business, so it took a lot to go into business in the first place. That was just your first step. If you thought it was going to get any easier, you were wrong.
Right. And our education today, Marc, is much more readily available than it was, 3 years ago. We have so much education available at our fingertips. And I think maybe you've heard me say this before, we've got to be a bit of a gold pan and siphon through some of the crap that might be out there and really look at what education is important and relevant to me and what moves the needle. But education has to be something that we constantly invest in.
Yeah, but an owner is going to know their business better than anybody.
Right.
And they got to your point, they have to take that education and they have to edit it and filter it, like you said, panning for gold, and find the gold nuggets that are in there that you can use and that can bring value to your business. Nobody knows that better than the store owner, but you have to expose yourself to it. And if you haven't exposed yourself to it, you're living in a bubble, and you can't live in a bubble today.
Right. Okay. So, Marc, before we wrap up, there are a ton of listeners out there that really don't understand who or what Management One is and does. Give us your I don't want to call it a pitch, but give us the insight that we need into who and what Management One is and what we do here.
Well, I said it before, our core purpose is to provide financial security to our retailers and our clients. And everything we do is about creating that financial security. And we do it through how you manage your inventory and how you flow it, what you own, when you own it, allows you to make decisions. So we believe that we've created the greatest cash flow planning tool ever developed for retail. If you follow it, you'll do well. Mm-hmm. And we provide with coaching with it, so there's accountability built in. But at the end of the day, it's all about how you turn inventory into cash to build and grow your business. And we figured the formula out for that. So and we've got really great people like Dan and your team that help implement it, because we believe that accountability makes it work. Somebody's there coaching you, working with you. It's a powerful tool, and when used, you have a competitive advantage. And if you don't use it, you're not going to have the same competitive advantage, no matter how smart you are.
And our solution is going through transition now. Talk a little bit about that transition and the investment that you've made with Retail Orbit.
Yeah, we've invested in a whole new platform to allow us to be the next generation. We can plug into artificial intelligence more easily. For example, we've got clients that get on Facebook Live and sell 250 items of something. I mean, that didn't happen before. People bought 12 items of a SKU, and maybe they sell it over 2 or 3 months. So demand forecasting is changing. We had to develop a platform to do that. We had to develop a platform to ingest more data and use we're planning over $3 billion worth of retail sales a year now, and it'll be $5 billion at the end of 2022 and $10 billion in a couple of years from now. So we have this virtual. We know what's happening every day in our world in the verticals that we plan, which is pretty extensive. So we can feed that back in, so we can show people where they can better leverage their dollars and make worthy investments. There's trends happen differently. Seasonality's changed. I mean, we talked about freshness, and that's disrupted seasonality. I mean, look how early the Christmas season started because everybody knew about scarcity. So, we're able to read demand in a way that other people can't. So, we created a new technology so people could use our information faster, quicker, wiser. And so we want to adapt to a change. Retail's evolving. We needed to have the technology to evolve as retail evolves, no matter what that looks like.
And so today, I would say that we have the ability to react to, today's data versus last month's data. Last month's data isn't as relevant as yesterday's data is in our world going forward. So we're reacting much quicker now than we ever. I don't want to say reacting. We're able to make decisions faster on more relevant data than perhaps we have in the past.
Right. And I think that's exactly true. I mean, I went back through COVID, and I found that our forecasting was like 90. This is 98.6% accurate. And that was, that was overall. I mean, that was looking at every single class. So outliers and everything, because we were literally changing plans mid-month because we were looking at data every day. So we ingest so much data every day. We get a sense of where, and we know which industries took off first, We know which areas of the geographically came out of COVID quicker than others, and we know how they're performing. We know what verticals hit first, and what they're performing. So using AI, we can now build new forecasting models. And actually, one part of our goal is, and where it's appropriate, is to get into continuous planning. That's really where I think that's what you're talking about,
right.
And that's where we're headed, where it makes sense. I mean, there's still the outdoor industry where they now want you to buy 14 months in advance. So every industry has its own nuance, but still there's always the then and there's always the now. Right. So you make money on the now, and the then is you prepare for it.
Right.
By the way, for those of you that are that have to buy far out, if you've got a good marketing channel on a good digital channel, that takes a lot of pressure off your buys.
It does. It really does.
So you can take a little bit more risk because you have a greater audience to participate with. So there's just, you kind of said it at the beginning. I've been at this, for my whole life. I've been in the business for, I don't know, almost 50 years. And if I consider the family business as a toddler going to my dad's store, sweeping the floors and working sidewalk sales, it's even longer. But I'm not just saying this, but I would love to be going into the retail business today. There's just so much out there to take a look at and do. And there's so many tools that just didn't exist that just are fabulous. And to embrace them and use them, and all that, it just allows you to do things that you couldn't have done before. It's right. Like being a kid in a candy shop. I think we're in the Disney world of retail today. And I think it's great. And people can do, think about how imaginative and creative you can be in your business that didn't exist before. Look at this podcast, for example, or, you're in Canada and I'm in Tucson. It's going to be 72 and sunny today here. I don't know what it's going to be like. You're
not 72 and sunny. It's white. I can tell you that.
So, but I'm in long sleeves. So
yeah,
I think it's just a wonderful, I don't know. I think on one hand, it's granted there's a lot of challenge and there's a certain amount of uncertainty, but if you don't focus on that, and you focus on what you can do with what's out there, that's really where your brain needs to be. I had a lot of people say, well, there's so much uncertainty, you really can't plan, but that didn't turn out to be true at all. We really could plan. Mm-hmm. I've never seen an instance, from the pandemic to 9/11 to the recession in 2008. I've been through some pretty fundamentally powerful events that were huge disruptors, and people never stopped buying. They might have postponed a little bit, but they always came back to shop. Right. So, it's the resilience of the shopper is insane, and the creativity that's out there in commerce is also crazy. And so I just, it's don't think about what you can't do. Think about what's possible and what you can do to the extent that you can do it. And you don't have to be the best at it. You just have to do it.
Right. And I think, Mark, what you said is absolutely worth repeating. You can plan. You can plan for anything. And if you're open to change and to adaptation, then the plan just adapts. If your decision is to get to Tucson where it's 72, come hell or high water, we're getting to Tucson. We might have to take 4 roads or 2 planes, but that's where we're going. And we adapt our plan along the way. So nothing can stop us from having a good plan. It's the realization of that plan is all about our ability to quickly evolve, to quickly adapt, to quickly shift.
Well, a plan measures your decisions. It's accountability. Right. We decided to do this. This is how we invested our money. This was the outcome. Yay, we won. Let's do this. Boo, we lost. Let's change it and do that. Right. That's all good stuff. The business is a series of opportunities and activities and problems that you solve. And the better you can look at them and pay attention to them, the easier it is to make decisions and you said react, but I probably would use the word respond. Right. React as a knee-jerk response, I think, is more of a thoughtful, purposeful thing where you're using data to make decisions about things that maybe you didn't think about before. And I think those are the ways that you really want to engage in your business and engage in your thinking and how you represent yourself and your business. And I think that to the extent that you're willing to do that, by the way, that doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, it takes
Right.
a couple of minutes a day, maybe 20 minutes or whatever, but
Right.
it doesn't take a lot of time to look at what's working and what's not working. We had talked about a scorecard before, Dan, and it's hard to do. I think it took our company a good 18 months to come up with a good scorecard. I mean, it really did take time. But find a good scorecard for your business and measure it every week. And if it's not working, then change the scorecard. If
Right.
it is working, then change it, increase it or lower it or whatever you have to do. But, use scorecards to measure yourself. And it really does help you. And the purpose of a scorecard is to identify a problem or an opportunity and solve it and do something with it.
Right. And I think that the power of having a scorecard that identifies, those red lights or those problems allow us to better respond. And I'm someone that, this about me. I live my life on a scorecard. I don't live my life on a scorecard. I rely heavily on a scorecard. It is my Monday morning quarterback report. It's the scorecard. There's a bunch of other reports that I look at or that we run and review to amass our scorecard, but it's the scorecard that keeps us focused. You are an EOS student. I'm an EOS student. We love that model. Is it right for retail? Yes and no. I said this to a retailer today, one of a management one client that I help with a bit of strategy. I said to her today, EOS is about taking tools that are applicable in your business. And the most valuable tool ever created by Gino and the team at EOS is the scorecard. Yep. It is the most valuable tool. I mean, there are a lot of great tools, but the scorecard, it lets us know when we're winning or losing. And isn't that what we need to know?
Yeah, that's why you meet every week to determine that. I think, a lot of it maybe to sum this all up is, how much time are you working in your business versus how much time are you working on your business? And I mean, it's old thinking, right?
Right.
But it's still true today. I mean, if you don't take time out to work on your business, which is kind of what we do with retail, it's what we do with retailers.
Right.
We're managerial accountants. We take the data out of your business to help you make decisions so that you can measure what you do and figure and solve problems. So that's what it's all about. But if you're always working in your business, you never have that chance to really solve those problems or work at it and build something for the future. Right. I mean, do you have a budget for next year? Do you have a 12-week cash flow plan? Do you know where you're going to invest your dollars? Do you know what your marketing strategy is going to be? Are you going to market prepared? What does going to market even mean anymore? Are you involved in virtual markets? What are you doing about compensating your people so they don't get stolen from you? What are you doing to recruit new people? What are you doing about compensation plans? There's a lot of things that you need to be working on and not just reacting or responding to as they happen. But there's things that you can be very proactive about it. And that was a word I actually got from, instead of being proactive, Steven Singer, who's a client in Philadelphia, said, well, we work to be preactive. And I love that term because I think to the extent that you can be preactive, you can, forestall or not have happen. I mean, in our business, we talk about where people are going to be in our company. We know where our growth is, where we're looking to be, so they feel a part of it and they're collaborating with us to get there. That's what EOS brings as well as a scorecard.
Right. And I think, Mark, one of the greatest attributes for any successful business person out there is their ability to ask questions of themselves, of their team, of their business. The more questions you ask, the greater ability you have to be preactive. I got to write that. I'm going to use that because I love it. And it comes from your ability to ask questions. And you just asked 20 questions inside of 30 seconds that should give every single business owner, retailer or otherwise, pause.
Well, it should show you the opportunities that exist, right? Because if you're asking those questions, every question begs the question of an opportunity to take advantage of. And I'm constantly asking questions of myself. What did we do well? What could we do better? What are other people doing? Does that make sense for us? How do we approach that? I mean, there's lots of things, but your brain has to be, you've got, like we said earlier, it's all in how you think about things.
Right.
And if you think about, what ifs and possibilities and potential, and you're patient with it, a lot of good things can happen. And then you got to obviously prioritize, but you can't do everything, and you can't jump around. You can't make every task urgent. I mean, there's a backdrop to all of what we're saying, but we get it. We're both in business, and we both deal with those issues. But it all starts with how you think about things.
Yeah. Well
and if
said.
you don't think about things in a way that is open, that's why I read every morning. I mean, I start every day by reading a couple articles from couple different publications, just to get my mind, to your point, to ask questions. I don't necessarily read it as the Bible or the gospel, but I do read it to ask questions. And, because one of the things you have to be good about is pundits like to write a lot of things that aren't right. I mean, I say a lot of things that may not be right. That's not really true. Let's pretend. So you got to ask questions to see if it makes sense to you. And not just take things at face value, but there are a lot of things out there. There are a lot of people doing a lot of things. And you said something really important earlier. There's never been more exposure to more information than there is today. You can be overloaded by it, but you could also be thoughtful about it and precise and go after it and learn from it, and then use that as a springboard to think.
Yeah, really well said. Marc, I've so much enjoyed this. Listeners, if you're sitting there asking yourself this question, can Management One help me? Do I need this in my life? Head over to management-one.com, read a little bit more, connect there. There is a host, a plethora, if you will, of retail experts and knowledge. The team at Management One is standing by to help you with your financial freedom, to help you better plan your future. Management-one.com. My friend, my peer, my mentor, Marc Weiss, thank you so much, man. Thank you. I very much appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Well, thanks for letting me share some ideas and thoughts. And by the way, read some of my blogs if you go to our website, because we actually put a lot of time and thought in putting those out there. And, that we try to reflect, where the world is today. So,
and I think that retailers, that is one of the things that you should be doing. And we share it, at CRS, Canadian Retail Solutions, and the Wealthy Retailer. We're constantly sharing these great messages. And Marc writes probably some of the most thoughtful articles out there. I actually talked with a retailer yesterday who I think we were both near tears talking about the Terry Fox article that you wrote a couple of months ago, close to us, a good Canadian boy. But Marc does do a great job. So retailers, get on that. Management-one.com. Get signed up for their newsletter. They've got a great retail community newsletter. And of course, if you're not already subscribed to the retailbycrs.com newsletter, get over there and get on that newsletter. We're going to share this podcast in that newsletter. Of course, a little bit more information about Management One and how they can help you. Again, Marc, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. It was great. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.